The rain drummed against my windshield in slow, heavy beats as the radio crackled with faint whispers I couldn't place. The highway stretched ahead like a black ribbon, glistening under broken streetlights that flickered like dying stars. My GPS suddenly froze, its screen covered in static as if something was jamming the signal. A single word formed through the static on the radio: Ashwood, pulling a cold shiver down my spine. I thought Ashwood Orphanage burned down, but some voices never stopped calling. The road bent sharply, leading to an abandoned motel whose neon sign buzzed like an insect in pain. I parked under the flickering glow, watching the red light reflect in puddles like blood and water. Inside, the air smelled of mildew, cigarette smoke, and something faintly metallic like old coins or dried blood. The man at the counter never looked up, his hands trembling as he slid me a single brass key. The number etched on the key was barely visible, scratched and worn down like it didn't want to be read. Room 6 was at the end of a narrow hallway where the wallpaper peeled like rotting skin. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, as though the walls themselves were listening. The key slid into the lock with a grinding sound, and the door creaked open to a room lit only by the flicker of an old TV. The television hissed with static, bathing the walls in a cold, shifting glow. I reached for the power button, but the static suddenly cleared to reveal a dimly lit basement on the screen. The basement looked real, not like a recording, but like a live feed from somewhere close. A faint scratching noise came from the TV speakers, almost like nails dragging across stone. The screen flickered again, and for a brief second I saw a pale hand press against the camera lens from inside the feed. My reflection in the black glass seemed wrong, my face slightly delayed when I moved. I backed away, but the TV volume rose on its own until the static roared in my ears. Then came the voice, a low, broken whisper that repeated my name, Terrian. My camera, still in my bag, switched on by itself and pointed toward the TV. The live feed changed, now showing the exact motel room I stood in, filmed from the corner ceiling. I turned sharply to look, but there was no camera mounted there. On the TV, I watched myself look around, but then my reflection smiled even though I didn't. I yanked the plug from the wall, killing the screen, but the static sound continued from somewhere deeper inside the building. The noise pulled me into a narrow maintenance door beside the vending machine in the hallway. The door wasn't locked, but it resisted like something heavy leaned against the other side. I pushed harder, and it groaned open to reveal steep wooden steps vanishing into darkness. A cold draft rose from below, carrying the smell of damp concrete and mold. My flashlight beam cut through the dust, illuminating pipes dripping with rust-colored water. At the bottom, a long corridor stretched into shadow, lined with doors that didn't belong in a motel basement. Each door was marked with a black number painted over older, faded digits. I counted them as I passed 1, 2, 3, until I reached 12. Beyond that was a 13th door, its surface covered in scratches like desperate claw marks. My breath fogged in the air as I reached for the handle, which felt ice cold under my skin. 37. The door creaked open to reveal a small, square room with a single TV in the center. The TV was older than the one upstairs, its screen rounded and dusty. It was already on, playing the same basement feed I had seen earlier. But this time, the camera in the feed began to move slowly, like someone was holding it. The view panned toward a corner, revealing a chair with leather straps and deep stains. Something sat in the chair, its head covered with a burlap sack soaked in dark liquid. The thing began to twitch, its shoulders jerking unnaturally. Then it stood, the burlap sack stretching as though something inside was pushing against it. My flashlight flickered and the TV went black. A low hum filled the room, vibrating in my chest like the air itself was charged. The static returned, but now it poured from every wall, like the building was broadcasting it. On the TV, the figure with the burlap sack now stood closer, too close, its head tilted toward me. The sack moved as though breathing, each inhale a wet, sucking sound. My camera beeped again, and its screen displayed the words, "He is here." The light bulb overhead popped, plunging me into near darkness except for the TV's pale glow. The figure stepped forward on the screen, its movements jerky, frame skipping like a corrupted video file. My ears filled with whispers layered over one another, all speaking my name. The smell of rot grew stronger, as though the figure wasn't just on the screen anymore. I turned toward the doorway, but it was gone, just a solid wall where I'd entered. The figure's hands pressed against the inside of the TV glass, the static distorting its form. Its fingers began to push through the screen like the surface was liquid. I stumbled back, but my feet stuck to the floor as though the shadows had hardened into tar. One pale, veined hand broke through completely, dripping with thick black fluid. The whispers became screams, and the screen exploded in a spray of glass and static. The figure stepped fully into the room, the burlap sack now splitting down the middle. Inside was no face, just a swirling void like a tunnel into another place. My camera shook violently in my hands, recording on its own. The lens began to fog, but it wasn't condensation, it was frost. The room temperature dropped sharply, my breath coming out in clouds. The figure reached out a hand, and my camera feed cut to black. When it came back, I was no longer in the basement, but standing outside in the rain. The motel was dark, no sign of life in any window. My car was gone, and the highway was just an endless stretch of darkness in both directions. In my pocket, I found the brass key again. Only now the number etched into it was 13. The sound of static followed me as I walked, growing louder with every step. Ahead in the darkness, a faint glow began to form, like another TV screen in the distance. The glow revealed an open doorway standing in the middle of the road. Inside the doorway, I could see the basement chair and the burlap sack waiting for me. I stepped closer, unable to stop myself, the static now deafening. The figure appeared in the doorway, its head tilting in the same jerky motion. My camera began recording again without my touch. The doorway pulled me in, the world outside collapsing into darkness. I was back in the static room, only this time the walls pulsed like they were alive. The figure stood behind me, its hand resting on my shoulder. The whispers returned, but now they were inside my head. They spoke in unison, one of us now. My reflection appeared in the black TV screen, but my eyes were hollow voids. The chair was now in the center of the room, straps undone, waiting. I felt myself walking toward it, the floor tilting like a funnel into darkness. The figure melted into the shadows, vanishing into the corners. The door slammed shut behind me with a metallic clang. The TV turned on by itself, showing the motel hallway. A man was walking down the hallway, but from a future I hadn't lived yet. Future me stopped at the 13th door and looked straight into the camera. He whispered something I couldn't hear, but I could read his lips. "Don't open it." The feed cut to static, and my head began to throb painfully. The whispers turned to laughter, high-pitched and childlike. My vision blurred, and the room seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The burlap sack hung from the ceiling like a pendulum, swinging slowly. A single drop of black fluid fell from it, sizzling as it hit the floor. The smell filled my lungs, thick and choking. The lights began to flicker rapidly, strobing the figure's face or lack thereof in flashes. My last thought before darkness took me was the sound of my own voice whispering from the static. And when I woke up, I was sitting in the chair with the burlap sack over my head.